When we picture a catastrophic cyber attack on a modern enterprise, we almost always imagine the same thing, right? We picture complex malware, some shadowy syndicate of hackers in hoodies, and crippling ransomware locking down servers in the dead of night. But in today's explainer, we're actually focusing on something much quieter, yet infinitely more devastating. We are talking about business email compromise, or BEC. See, this isn't brute force hacking. It's really a surgically precise financial extraction machine that subverts routine business processes and ultimately exploits human psychology.
So let's look at this staggering number. Over $55 billion. To put that into perspective, that represents the global exposed losses to BEC over just the last decade, across more than 305,000 domestic and international incidents. This completely invisible threat has steadily and vastly outpaced traditional malware when it comes to sheer financial extraction. It's literally the most financially damaging cybercrime on record. To really unpack this, we are going to walk through the $55 billion macroeconomics of the threat, the four-stage BEC lifecycle, cryptographic mail, phishing-resistant identity, and finally the financial fraud kill chain.
Okay, Part 1, the $55 billion invisible threat.
These attacks are costing organizations an average of $4.8 million per single incident. And if you look at the evolution here, it becomes incredibly clear why our old defenses are failing us. Think about legacy BEC. It was mostly constrained by language barriers. A misspelled word or just kind of unusual phrasing, that was the red flag for an attentive finance employee. But modern AI BEC, it's a whole different ballgame. Adversaries are using underground generative AI tools like WormGPT for a mere $110 a month. These tools have absolutely zero ethical guardrails, but ironically, they generate grammatically flawless, context-perfect lores. In fact, with about 40% of BEC emails now being AI-generated, subjective human verification is basically dead. We absolutely have to shift to rigid cryptographic enforcement.
Moving on to Part 2, the four-stage BEC lifecycle.
We need to understand that these aren't just generic spam blasts. They are meticulously crafted, advanced, persistent threats. So let's move through this life cycle to see how an attacker builds their trap. Stage 1 is reconnaissance. Attackers use open-source intelligence to perfectly map out your corporate hierarchy, often targeting executives in a tactic that is whaling. Actually, the Austrian aerospace supplier FACC lost an unbelievable 42 million euros in a single incident when attackers flawlessly impersonated their CEO. Then we hit Stage 2, infiltration. Stage 3 is observation, and this is where it gets creepy. The attacker establishes absolute silence inside a compromised inbox. They set up hidden mailbox rules to route specific incoming emails, like sensitive invoices, directly into obscure folders like RSS feeds or the archive, and instantly mark them as read. They will patiently sit there, studying your formatting and payment schedules for months before finally moving to Stage 4, execution.
Now, let's zoom in on that second stage, infiltration, and specifically look at the AITM attack, or adversary in the middle. The absolutely crucial point to grasp here is that standard multi-factor authentication, those SMS codes you get texted to your phone, they are completely bypassed. The attacker simply deploys a reverse proxy server that sits right between you and your legitimate cloud provider. You type your password, the proxy silently forwards it. The cloud provider asks for your MFA code, you type it in, the proxy forwards that too. Then the legitimate server issues a perfectly valid session cookie. Bam! The proxy intercepts that cookie, and the attacker injects it into their own browser. They now have completely unfettered access, and they did it without triggering a single failed login alert. So once they have that silent access, they just wait for the perfect moment to strike using very specific psychological traps. The most lucrative one is vendor email compromise, or VEC. This is where they hijacked an ongoing, perfectly legitimate invoice thread and just casually tell accounts payable that the vendor is switching banking systems. If they aren't actually inside the network yet, they'll use domain spoofing or homoglyphs, registering lookalike domains where they swap, say, a lowercase l for a capital I, which is practically invisible to the human eye. Or they'll go for payroll diversion, posing as an employee and tricking human resources into diverting a salary right into an attacker-controlled drop account.
Let's look at how to stop this in Part 3. Deep defense through cryptographic mail.
To build the very first layer of our unbreakable vault, we have to fix a fundamental architectural flaw of basic email. And that flaw is, it possesses no native sender verification whatsoever. But this NIST triad mathematically guarantees the email's origin. First up, you have SPF, which publishes a public ledger in your DNS of IP addresses that are actually authorized to send emails on your behalf. Second is DKIM. This uses asymmetric cryptography to attach a secure SHA-256 hash to the email headers. It guarantees message integrity, meaning not a single byte was altered in transit. And third, DMARC, which enforces alignment between the two. Progressing your organization to a DMARC P=reject policy means the receiving server will just entirely drop unauthenticated emails right at the gateway. This step effectively immunizes your entire organization against direct exact domain spoofing and whaling.
That brings us to part 4, deep defense through phishing-resistant identity.
While DMARC is incredible for stopping external spoofing, we still need a second layer to stop attackers from compromising our internal employee accounts. Legacy MFA, which relies on shared secrets, is just structurally flawed under modern threat models. Authentication Assurance Level 1, just using passwords, is obviously a critical risk. But even AAL2, which covers SMS codes or mobile push notifications, remains a very high risk. Why? Because a user can easily be tricked into typing that code into a proxy, or they can be beaten down by MFA fatigue. That's where an attacker just aggressively spams your phone with approval requests until you finally give up and hit accept just to make it stop. This is exactly why federal agencies and critical infrastructure mandates now require the shift to hardware-backed AAL3, which provides negligible risk and actual structural immunity. And the reason AL3 works so perfectly really comes down to one single brilliant concept: origin binding. Here's how it works. When you attempt to log in, your web browser natively extracts the true URL of the page you're looking at, and it writes it into a protected structure called client data JSON. Your hardware authenticator then takes the expected legitimate domain name and creates a hash called an RPID hash. It mathematically verifies that those two pieces of data match perfectly. Because the private key never ever leaves the physical silicon of your hardware key, a domain mismatch on a sneaky lookalike proxy site causes the cryptographic handshake to just fail instantly. The IATM attack becomes completely and utterly useless. Finally, part 5, the financial fraud kill chain. Okay, so what happens if human error actually bypasses the vault and funds are actively wired to a cybercriminal? In that exact moment, we instantly shift to an emergency crisis response. Speed is your absolute only weapon here. When fraudulent funds leave a corporate account, you immediately enter what law enforcement calls the golden window, which is a maximum of 24 to 72 hours. If you detect the fraud within this highly narrow window, you have a solid statistical probability of intercepting and freezing the transaction. But if that window closes, the capital vanishes into complex international networks of cryptocurrency exchanges and money mules, and at that point, it becomes entirely unrecoverable. Depending on where you are in the world, you have to activate rapid response infrastructure to expand tracking to second-hop accounts and international intermediary banks to claw back your funds. In the United States, for example, filing a highly detailed report with IC3 triggers the FBI's Recovery Asset Team. And get this, they successfully froze $507 million in 2025 alone. Over in India, they utilize the CFC-FRMS. This is integrated directly via a 1930 national cybercrime helpline, connecting law enforcement with every major bank and payment wallet in the country for near real-time tracing. Ultimately, though, you really don't want to ever have to rely on the kill chain. So human-centric friction points and process-based safeguards are your final line of defense. Human resources must have mandatory out-of-band verification before they ever alter direct deposits. Accounts payable must mandate secondary verbal confirmations using known pre-established phone numbers. And let's be clear, never use the phone number listed in the email that's requesting the change. Just ensuring that a simple secondary phone call actually takes place can completely neutralize the psychological manipulation of a deepfake or flawless AI lure. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to evaluate your own organization's readiness today. If your CEO urgently requested a wired transfer right now, could your organization mathematically prove it was actually them? Because as AI-driven lures become completely indistinguishable from reality, and with over $55 billion already extracted globally, relying on trust is just no longer an option. It is absolutely time to rely on cryptography.